Let's look at surveys. When you see a survey, ask who carried out the survey. Is this group reliable? And when you see a survey, ask how was the sample selected? Is it a biased sample? Here's an example. In 1936, Literary Digest attempted to predict the winner of the presidential election by surveying its readers. They also obtained names from every telephone directory in the U.S., lists of people who owned automobiles, members of clubs, etc. They surveyed 2.4 million people. It's an enormous sample. Their prediction? Alf Landon would win 370 votes to Roosevelt's 161. So in other words, a landslide in favor of Alf Landon. The result? The states that Roosevelt won are in blue. Alf Landon won only Vermont and Maine. FDR won the election with 523 votes to Landon's 8. Now look at how far off their prediction was. They predicted that Landon would win 370 and Roosevelt would win 161, and the result was completely different. Here is the magazine cover from the next week's edition of Literary Digest. Is our face red? What went wrong? Well, look at their survey. Even though it was an enormous survey, look at these people that they surveyed. Okay, they surveyed their readers. They surveyed every telephone directory in the United States, people who owned automobiles, members of clubs. This is a disproportionately wealthy survey sample. The average person might not be reading Literary Digest. The equivalent today would be trying to decide some economic question and surveying readers of Fortune magazine. Yeah, there are poor people who read Fortune magazine, but it's a disproportionately wealthy audience. Same thing here. Even if you survey 2 million people, it's not good unless you have some cross-section of the American public, some random sample, and theirs was not a cross-section. They surveyed a disproportionately wealthy population. Some pollsters rely on convenience sampling. They select the people easiest to reach. For example, mall interviewers may interview people who happen to be at the mall. Is that a good representative sample of the U.S. population? No. Mall shoppers include a disproportionate number of teenagers, retired people, and wealthy people. Also, you should ask, was the sample self-selected? Advice columnist Ann Landers asked her readers to write to her with their response to the question, if you had to do it over again, would you have children? She received 10,000 responses. 70% said no. The New York Newsday selected a national random sample of 1,373 parents and asked them the same question. If you had to do it over again, would you have children? 91% said yes. Now these are both sizable samples. But the problem, if you'll note in the previous one, was that the people had to volunteer. They actually voluntarily responded to the question. Whereas New York Newsday didn't rely on these voluntary responses. Instead, they went out and they surveyed the people. And they ended up with a completely different answer. The moral of the story is, don't trust phone-in polls or mail-in polls. They rely on self-selected samples, voluntary response samples, which may be biased. Because only the people who feel strongly enough about the question are going to bother to respond. And that's not what you want. You want a random cross-section of the public, not a cross-section of the public that happens to feel strongly about it. You'll get a wrong answer. When you see a survey ask, is the sample size large enough? If the sample size is small, then the results are not as useful. And also ask, what was the response rate? If a high response rate is better, but we're learning that it's not necessarily much better. You should also ask when the survey was conducted, because old survey data may not be as useful. And was the survey question slanted in some way? For example, years ago, 1992, Ross Perot and his campaign asked people, this was when he was running for president, should laws be passed to eliminate all possibility of special interests giving huge sums of money to candidates? You can just imagine Mr. Moneybags from the Monopoly game. 80% said, yes, we should eliminate that possibility. But when it was phrased in a more neutral fashion, should laws be passed to prohibit interest groups from contributing to campaigns, or do groups have a right to contribute to the candidate they support? Only 40% said yes. So the way you phrase the question affects the outcome of the question. If the question is phrased in an inflammatory way, you're more likely to get, a certain answer. Here's another example. This was a poll from the Chicago Tribune. A Tribune poll shows that Chicago voters oppose a city. The question was, the City Council, Chicago City Council, is considering banning smoking throughout all Chicago restaurants, including their bar areas. Do you favor or oppose the plan? Only 42% of people were in favor of it. 49% were opposed to it. It's really amazing, in light of the fact that only 1/4 of adults smoke, that 42% of people would be in favor of this, whereas 49% would be opposed. Now, here's the reason. Notice, this question did not mention bars. Would you favor a law that would prohibit smoking in most public indoor spaces, including restaurants? With no mention of bars in the question, 71% of respondents said they supported such a prohibition. Whereas if you'll note in the previous question mentioned bars. Oh, once you throw in bars, people figure, oh, if it's a bar, people are going to smoke. Go ahead and let them smoke. But if you don't mention bars in the question, then 71% of people say, yeah, you should ban smoking in restaurants. So again, the way you phrase the question affects the way the survey turns out. When you see a survey ask, were people honest when they answered the question? Here's an example. Seniors and sophomores in District 113 were recently surveyed about drug use. The question is, what percentage of seniors in District 113, that's Deerfield High School, Highland Park High School here near Trinity, what percentage of seniors have used marijuana in the last 30 days? Care to guess what the response was? 33% said yes. So 33% said they had used marijuana in the last 30 days. Now, you need to be careful when you ask questions like this. People might not be honest about drug use or sexual orientation or personal information like income or GPA. In fact, the United Nations, which produces this drug survey each year, has specific instructions about how to conduct such a survey. You don't have to read all this, but basically it says you need to have people submit their responses in an envelope. You have to have a trusted student collect the information from students, collect these envelopes from students, etc. You need to be careful. What you don't want to do is just have someone say at the front of the class, okay, if you've smoked weed in the last 30 days, raise your hand. You're not going to get an honest answer in that way. You can't do it that way. When you see a survey ask, were the people who answered the question informed enough to answer the question? In other words, do they really know what they're talking about? So for example, when I was shopping for a textbook for this course, one of the considerations was, for all practical purposes, mathematical literacy in today's world. Now, it seems to get some decent ratings from these people, notice. A couple of people gave it 5 stars, but then there were some people who gave it 1 star. And here's one of the respondents, for example, that gave it 2 stars. The dustiest book. This book was so dusty and ancient when I received it. Right when I opened the envelope, I started coughing. At least I bought it for a cheap price. And as a consequence, this person gave it 2 stars. No! 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 You are not rating the copy of the book that you got. You're rating the content of the book, not whether it's dusty or dirty or stained. You can't blame the author for that. That's absurd. What a ridiculous... You've got to be wary of these ratings. What a ridiculous way to rate a book. Here's another example. Ramona Quimby, age 8. Now, most people really like the book. I think I've read this to my kids, or maybe my wife has. There were a few people who really didn't like it, including this one person who gave it 1 star and said, awesome book. Awesome book, Beverly, clearly. I really want another one. I'll get it tomorrow. Run-on sentence there. But you did a great job. I rated it 5 stars. No, actually you didn't. You just gave it 0. You just gave it 1 star. But when you look at the person who rated this book, Sydney Hamilton, you realize why she may have made the mistake. Maybe she thought she gave it 5 stars, but she really gave it 1 star. So again, you always need to ask the question, do the people rating the book really know what they're talking about? One more example of finite mathematics and applied approach. Again, this book got 5 stars. So you might think, oh man, this is a stellar book. I've got to use this for my course. But then notice, it got only 2 reviews. And read these 2 reviews. This book was like new. Did not take long to arrive. This book sells for about $169 and I bought it for $40. Love it. Well, I'm glad it was a great buy, but I'm not asking you to rate the buy. I'm asking you to rate the book. Ditto for this one. The order went smoothly. I received in a timely manner the book. It was in excellent condition, very affordable. Oh my goodness. Rate the book, not the transaction. Holy cow.